May 14th, 1944, 0612, 10 miles off the lee. Coast of Bougainville, 3200 feet above a green glassy ocean that smelled faintly of diesel and salt. The cockpit was hot, the plexiglass dome fogged with the breath of men and the exhalations of a Rolls-Royce-sized pair of Allisons, far behind and to either side. Captain Tom Keller leaned forward in his leather-clipped flight jacket, eyes squinting through the sun-scorched visor as the twin booms of his P-38. Lightning cut the morning like a polished spear. The instrument panel glittered with needles that tugged and sighed. Boost pressure, manifold temperatures, RPM, each a small, living thing that the pilot coaxed with a practiced hand. His hands smelled of nicotine and engine oil. Under the wings, 2 drop tanks hung like extra lungs, humming with gasoline and the promise of time. The guns in the nose, 4 Browning .50 caliber. Machine guns and a 20mm cannon, set silent and cold. A concentrated fist pointed forward. The Lightning's intake scoops inhaled the island dawn. The turbochargers whispered from the booms. A high, nervous hiss that meant power at altitude where the Japanese Zeros feared to climb. Keller's wingman, Lieutenant Jack Rook Marlowe, kept tight on his starboard boom, the 2 aircraft a matched shadow over the reef. Ahead, the jagged sprockets of the island rose. Black rock, coconut stumps, and a scattering of brown roofs that could be a village or a camouflaged field hospital. From the northeast, thin columns of smoke curled up where a dawn strafing had found timber and fuel. The radio hissed, short, clipped, bogies, bearing 060, altitude 500. The voice belonged to the flight leader on the ground controller's net. It was flat with the kind of calm that means a man's mind is already at work, counting the odds. They'd been briefed, sweep, bait, and draw the enemy out. The Japanese had laughed at the Lightning at first. That laugh had been a sound they heard in low, confident radio calls from other fighters, high turning. Zeros that expected the dogfight written in old rules. Who could turn tighter, who could stall and recover fastest. The P-38's name, Lightning, had been shrugged at as a curious, ungainly American wedge, until mornings like this, when the Lightning's booms loomed like twin vultures, and when its fire was not patient but surgical. Keller felt the tension like a toothache behind his molars. Across the radio, the intelligence officer's voice crackled once. Possible high-value element. Japanese aces reported operating out of that ridge. Stay loose. Don't get dragged down. Chill slid down his spine despite the heat. Ace meant skill, and skill meant improvisation. And improvisation could throw a plan off axis in a heartbeat. He imagined briefly the other cockpit. The narrow view of a Japanese pilot, black hair and a helmet like a crown. The fabric of a flight suit tight at the throat. Eyes accustomed to the low, lazy hunt. The Japanese planes were lithe, a Zero's graceful planform, an Oscar's stubby ferocity. Their pilots had a different doctrine. Close, intimate combat, eyesight, and instinct. The Americans had altitude, weight, concentrated fire. The Lightning did not need to dance. It could strike from above, pop, and vanish. But to do that here, among islands that could be a maze of overhangs and thermals, required nerve. Keller toggled the boost, feeling the throttle respond like a horse taken by the bit. "Power up, Rook. Follow my 6, he said. The words were clipped, professional. Marlowe answered with a quick, "Roger." Below, a skiff of foam traced the reef like a white calligraphy stroke. Then, sound on the left. The thin, high keening that heralded a Zero slicing the light. 3 dark shapes peeled off the island and climbed with wicked grace. Tiny, eager. They were lower than Keller expected, hugging island lee to gain the extra lift. They were bait, or they were hounds, sent to hunt. The lead plane carried bright, rakish streamers of red on its wings, and the pilot inside had the fixed smile of someone who thought they had the advantage. Keller's breathing slowed, a practiced metronome. He felt the P-38's weight shift as he banked, the twin engines complaining then singing into a steady note. He trimmed with small, precise movements. The Lightning did not turn like a Zero. It carved with momentum. He kept his eyes where metal, met sky and where wingtip shadows. Cut across green water. In the mirror, he saw his wingman, a dark, steady dot, and beyond that, the island's cliff line, a jagged black tooth. Fire bloomed first from the Japanese, a nervous burst that scorched the bright top of a cloud and sent a spray of water vapor trailing. The tracers were orange and eager, passing harmlessly under Keller's nose. He watched for the pilot's head to twist, for the telltale flash of a gun sight. He waited, because waiting meant choosing the exact second to convert altitude into kill. He pushed the stick forward, rolled the Lightning under the sun, and dove. The world narrowed. Wind, thunder, the roar of turbochargers, the smell of heated metal. The engines answered with a clean, hungry roar. The needles climbed. The P-38 accelerated like a dropped stone, its twin booms slicing the air. Make your shot count, Keller thought. Not as prayer, but as arithmetic. Line up, close, hold. Below, the Japanese fighters banked hard to follow, their thin wings stabbing at the air. In the closed world of this dive, the Lightning's nose became a spear. Keller's thumb found the trigger and eased. The nose guns answered like a chorus, the 50s stitching the air with white hot threads and the 20-millimeter punching holes in a disciplined pattern that ate an enemy's chance to escape. One plane smoked. The pilot in it, he'd had no time to laugh. His tail ballooned and separated into a black ribbon that unfurled down into the trees. The other two scattered, surprised now, like startled predators who had finally felt the tooth. Keller pulled up, the G's flattening the breath from his chest for an instant. The Lightning climbed, heavy with speed and with the taste of success. On the radio, someone spoke, hushed, stunned. One bogey down. One may be damaged. Watch for retaliation. Behind the islands, high and patient, others were already moving. A badger of iron, P-38s threading between sun and cloud. The morning had shifted. The laugh of the Japanese aces, once carried on the wind like cocky taunts, would become something else today. A noise swallowed by the roar of engines and the hard geometry of a hunt. The dive had scattered the first trio, but Keller knew better than to believe the sky was clear. Japanese aces didn't fly in threes. They flew in layered traps, teams of hunters stacked in altitude bands, waiting for the impatient or the overconfident to give them an angle. And if intelligence was right, one of those hunters today was Saburō, the Viper, Saito, an ace whose reputation stretched across every island chain the Japanese still held. Keller steadied his breathing, letting the Lightning climb back into the upper air. The turbochargers whined with purpose, feeding the big Allisons as the altimeter ticked upward. Sweat slid down his temples. The cockpit felt like a tin greenhouse as the morning sun clawed its way higher. Below him, the two surviving Zeros banked wide, regrouping. They weren't fleeing. They were repositioning. Marlowe's voice cracked in. "Tom, contact's high, 11 o'clock. Keller snapped his eyes up. There, like ink droplets staining the brilliant blue, 4 Zeros descending in a disciplined box formation. No frantic dives, no eager bursts of machine gun fire. These men were calm, deliberate, veterans. The lead Zero bore deep crimson chevrons, clean, sharp, unmistakable even from distance. Saito. Keller whispered under his breath. "So you did take the bait?" The radio came alive with calls from other Lightning flights moving along the coast, but Keller tuned it out. The sky's geometry demanded his full mind. The Japanese aces were lining up in a shallow descent, just enough to control closure, not enough to bleed too much altitude. They had learned. They weren't going to let the Lightning dictate the terms twice. "Rook, tighten up," Keller said. They're here for a fight." Marlowe nudged closer until his starboard wing shimmered in Keller's mirror like a polished blade. The two P-38s rose together, sun behind them, silhouettes hard to read from below. For a moment, just a breath, the air felt still. Then the Japanese formation began to spread. Not sloppily, but intelligently, like a hunting pack, creating lanes of denial. One Zero dropped low, feigning vulnerability. Another held center, steady as a metronome, bait for Rook. The remaining two positioned for crossing angles where the Lightning's wide turn radius would betray it. Keller felt it in his bones. This was no ordinary flight. This was a coordinated attempt to kill P-38s, flown by men who had spent years perfecting their instincts. But Keller had his own instincts, and a weapon they could not match. Altitude. He pushed the throttles forward. The Allisons roared, the Lightning surged upward into the sun's glare. It was a move the Japanese hated because the Zero's engine gasped thin at high altitude. The P-38, by contrast, grew sharper, its power band widening as the turbochargers gulped the thinning air. Saito's formation responded instantly. The lead ace rolled his Zero into a climbing arc, angling to intercept. His wingmen shifted positions like dancers in a deadly choreography. Keller grinned, not out of arrogance, but because this was the kind of duel pilots imagined in long, quiet nights. He banked hard right, forcing Saito to commit. The Japanese ace followed, wings shimmering as he matched Keller's turn more tightly than any Western pilot could. The Zero's silhouette glowed white against the rising sun, its fuselage almost beautiful in its precision. "Tom, he's on you!" Marlowe shouted. "I know." Keller rolled left suddenly, too suddenly for a Zero at this altitude to match cleanly. The Lightning skidded, corrected, then bit into a fresh dive angle. The sun behind him blinded Saito for a critical heartbeat. It was enough. Keller split side downward, cutting across the path of the lowest Zero, the bait plane. The Japanese pilot inside had expected a slow turn fight. What he got instead was a wall of momentum and 20-millimeter fury screaming down from above. Keller fired. The rounds tore through the Zero's wing root with such violence that the entire left panel snapped free. The aircraft spiraled like a broken kite, trailing flame that turned the ocean surface below into a flickering mirror of orange and black. One down, 3 to go, and Saito was no longer playing games. The remaining Zeros tightened formation and came on with disciplined fury. Tracers stitched past Keller's canopy like glowing needles. He felt the Lightning vibrate under the stress of evasive maneuvers, the frame creaking as he yanked the stick through a high G-bank. Rook cut across them, Force a cross turn, Keller ordered. Marlowe looped high, creating a crossing axis that forced the Japanese aces to split again. For a moment, the sky became a spinning lattice of motion. 3 aircraft diving, 2 climbing, sunlight flashing on canopies, smoke trails curling like ribbons. Then Keller spotted him. Saito. The ace had broken from the furball, climbing into a vertical spiral. His signature move meant to draw pilots upward into a stall trap. He was inviting Keller to chase him, and Keller did, but not the way Saito expected. Instead of climbing into the spiral, Keller went wide, gathering speed, not altitude. He knew the math. At this altitude, with this dive vector, the lightning could slash across the spiral and meet Saito at its apex like a hammer striking the head of a nail. He timed it. He counted the seconds. He watched the spiral tighten. And when the moment came, Keller pulled back hard, engines howling. The lightning surged upward, straight into the path of the descending Zero. For the first time that morning, Saito hesitated, and hesitation in the sky was death. Keller saw Saito's hesitation, a tiny wobble in the Zero's nose, a flicker of uncertainty as the Japanese ace realized the lightning was not following the script he had written with years of combat. And in that fraction of a second, the 2 fighters rushed toward each other, closing at nearly 700 miles per hour. Keller thumbed the trigger. The lightning's nose guns erupted in a blistering, thunderous burst, white tracers converging into a single, lethal cone. For a heartbeat, it looked like Saito's Zero was flying directly into a burning tunnel of gunfire. But Saburō Saito had not survived 3 years of island warfare by being predictable. At the last instant, he kicked hard left rudder and rolled. The Zero flattened into a sliding skid that seemed to defy the laws of lift. The lightning's cannon shells tore through empty sky, whistling past Saito's tail by inches. In Keller's canopy, the Japanese ace flashed past, a white fuselage, red disc, canopy gleam, a ghost with wings. And then he was gone beneath Keller's nose. Marlowe's sharp voice crackled over the radio. "Tom, he dodged it. He's coming around." Keller didn't answer. His eyes were already hunting. He rolled inverted and pulled into a descending arc. But Saito had anticipated exactly that. The Japanese ace climbed into a vertical corkscrew, using the tight turn performance of the Zero to slam himself into position behind the lightning's left boom. A perfect counter. Tracers burst past Keller's canopy, thin orange lines followed by violent clangs as rounds slapped into the lightning's tailplane. "Jesus, he's on me," Keller hissed, throwing the P-38 into a skid that fought against its own weight. The lightning resisted. This was not its territory. Below 20,000 feet, with speed dropping, a Zero could carve circles around it. And Saito intended to prove exactly that. The Japanese ace was merciless. He stuck to Keller's boom with eerie precision, matching every skid, every attempt to break. Keller felt the lightning shudder again, metal whining as Saito's round stitched up the aircraft's spine. One round cracked the canopy glass. Another ricocheted off the armor behind his head. Marlowe dove in from above, firing a protective burst so close that Keller could see the muzzle flashes reflecting in his own canopy. Saito broke away just in time, spiraling upward in a tight helix to avoid Marlowe's fire. Keller exhaled a shaky breath, then shoved the throttles forward hard enough to rattle the cockpit. "Rook, reset. He's pulling us into low altitude. Don't play his game." But Saito wanted them high or low. Didn't matter. He wanted them predictable. And Keller refused to be predictable. He pulled the lightning into a shallow climb, not steep enough for Saito to exploit with a stall trap, but enough to regain some of the lightning's vertical authority. Saito tracked him, climbing with a shark-like patience. The Zero's wings glinted gold as it rose. And for the first time, Keller saw the pilot's face just a flicker through the canopy. Calm, focused, almost serene. The Viper earned his name, not for anger, but for precision. And now he closed in with that same reptilian inevitability. Saito attacked again. He dove head-on. Most pilots avoided head-on attacks in Zeros. The nose guns were too light. The lightnings were devastating. But Saito wasn't attacking to kill in this pass. He was attacking to control. He angled across Keller's nose just enough to force the lightning into a defensive break. Keller jerked the stick left to avoid a collision, but the instant he did, Saito rolled under him and snapped into position on his tail. A perfect, graceful trap. "He's back on you, hard!" Marlowe shouted. Keller felt it. The Zero's silhouette grew larger in his mirror, sunlight flashing off its spinner like a warning beacon. The Viper had him in a tightening noose. Keller jinked right, then left, but the lightning wasn't built for these knife-fight angles. Come on, Keller whispered through clenched teeth, pushing the lightning toward the only escape it had. Speed. He nosed over into a shallow dive. The engine screamed, turbochargers spooling into a rising metallic shriek. The lightning surged forward, but Saito stayed glued to him, shaking, buffeted, but still there. A Zero shouldn't have been able to stay in formation at this speed. But Saito was forcing it, pushing his aircraft to the edge of structural failure. His round snapped past Keller's canopy again. 2 punched clean through the right boom. Red lights flickered on Keller's panel, partial hydraulics loss. "Tom, bail? Bail if you have to," Marlowe shouted, his voice cracking. Keller ignored him. Because in the dive, something shifted. The Zero began to tremble, hard. The fabric-covered ailerons fluttered visibly. The wings vibrated, shuddering as airflow tore at them. Zeros weren't built for high-speed dives. Their controls stiffened. Their structure protested. Saito knew it, but he didn't pull away. He was committed, too committed. And Keller realized he now held the one advantage a Zero could never overcome. Physics. Rook, Keller whispered. Get ready. I'm about to break. The lightning screamed downward. Saito followed. The airframe trembled as both aircraft approached terminal stress. Keller felt the stick grow heavy, the lightning resisting control input like a stubborn beast. Now, Keller yanked the lightning into a high-speed brake turn that a Zero simply could not follow without tearing itself apart. Saito tried. Keller saw the moment the Zero crossed its structural limits. The left wing buckled. The right wing twisted. The aircraft lurched violently, shuddering like a wounded bird. Saburō Saito, the Viper of the islands, was caught in a trap of his own making. The Zero's wings warped under the crushing force of the dive, bending like thin willow branches in a storm they were never meant to survive. Keller watched it through the rear canopy, his breath caught, his heart pounding in the cage of his ribs. For a moment, it looked as if Saito might recover, as if the Ace's legendary finesse could will the crippled machine back into harmony with the air. But physics didn't negotiate. A thin puff of smoke burst from the right wing root, followed by a violent shudder that rippled down the fuselage. The Zero jolted, yawed hard, and then the left wing snapped, not cleanly. The metal sheared in a jagged, twisting tear, flinging aluminum into the slipstream like shards of a shattered blade. The aircraft lurched into a savage barrel roll, losing altitude in a sickening, spiraling plunge. Saito fought. Even from distance, Keller could see the pilot wrestling the stick, the Zero's control surfaces fluttering uselessly. Smoke trailed from the ruptured engine cowling, marking the sky with a dark, falling ribbon. Marlowe's voice, breathless and awed, filtered through the headset. Tom, you got him. He's done. But Keller didn't answer. Not yet. The Zero continued its death spiral, the broken wing fluttering away into the void as the fuselage spun toward the sea. At 5,000 feet, the aircraft's canopy burst free. A figure tumbled out, small, dark, framed by the burning light of morning. Saito. The parachute deployed a moment later, a stark white bloom against the endless blue. It jerked violently as the wind caught it, swinging the Ace beneath it like a pendulum. Keller exhaled, a long, slow release of breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Rook, he said quietly. Mark his position. Someone will want to know where he came down. Marlowe didn't ask why. He didn't need to. There was a code among pilots, spoken or not. Victory didn't erase respect, but the moment of stillness didn't last. From the east, 3 more Zeros dove in, their engines snarling like hornets. These weren't rookies. Their approach was clean, silent, coordinated. Reinforcements. They must have been circling the ridge, waiting for Saito's signal. And now that the Viper had fallen, they were coming with fury. Rook, break, we're not done yet, Keller snapped. The lightning surged upward, Keller hauling the stick into a climbing spiral that clawed for altitude. The controls fought him. The right boom damage made the aircraft sluggish, the hydraulics warning light still pulsing an angry red. But the lightning could take punishment. It had brought pilots home with holes the size of fists, with cylinders blown out, with half the electrics dead. Zeros? A few well-placed rounds could take them from sky to fire. The 3 Japanese fighters approached in a tight V, their formation perfect. These were aces, or close to it. Saito's protégés, perhaps. They didn't flinch at the sight of their commander descending under a parachute. They flew straighter, harder. They wanted blood now. Marlowe cut across their nose, firing a burst that forced the right side Zero to break and scatter. The other 2 stayed locked on Keller's position. He couldn't outturn them, not with a wounded lightning. He needed space, altitude, time. He nosed down, diving shallow, then rolled inverted and dropped into a fast descent toward a bank of broken clouds. Tom, you lose altitude now, they'll pin you, Marlowe warned. Exactly, Keller said. He sliced into the clouds. The world became a smear of white vapor and turbulence. The cockpit dimmed, shadows blended, waves of cold air crawled through broken seams in the canopy. Behind him, tracers lanced into the mist. Come on, deeper, just a little deeper, Keller whispered. The Zero pilots followed, silhouettes flickering through the cloud bank like ghosts chasing a flare. Then Keller saw it, a break in the cloud, a shaft of light. And below that, terrain. Not open ocean, not jungle. A jagged line of volcanic cliffs rising from the island's northern edge like a black iron wall. Perfect. Keller leveled out just above the cliff edge, the lightning slicing through the air with a howl. The Zeros behind him burst from the cloud seconds later, fast, committed, focused entirely on getting guns on target. They didn't see the terrain until it filled their windscreen. The lead Zero rolled frantically left, barely clearing the rock. The second rolled right, slipping past in a razor-thin margin. But the third, he pulled up too late. The Zero slammed into the cliffside in a burst of flame and metal, debris tumbling down into the dense palms below. Keller flinched, not from fear, from the shock of how close he had come to sharing that fate. Marlowe fell into formation beside him, breathing hard. "Two left, and they're pissed," he said. Keller nodded, already scanning the horizon. "Oh, they're more than pissed," Keller murmured. "They just lost their master." And now the apprentices wanted revenge. The two remaining Zeros, Saito's surviving wingmen, fell into a predatory line astern, their silhouettes steady against the shimmering horizon. These weren't hot-headed rookies charging in for glory. They flew with a cold purpose, trailing Keller and Marlowe with an unsettling calm. The death of their master hadn't rattled them. It had focused them. Keller wiped a thin smear of sweat from his brow. The Lightning's cockpit was still sweltering, but now, beneath the heat, he felt a deeper vibration, an irregular tremor from the damaged right boom. The P-38 was hurt, and every second of hard flying strained the weakened structure. Marlowe's voice came low and urgent. "Tom, we can't keep fighting like this. They know you're wounded." Keller didn't answer immediately. He studied the sky ahead, clouds thickening, sunlight fracturing into golden shards across the sea. They needed altitude, but the Lightning couldn't outclimb undamaged Zeros. They needed speed, but the boom damage made high-speed maneuvers dangerous. They needed something else. "Stay close," Keller finally said. "We take them together." He nudged the throttle, feeling the Lightning respond with a low growl, less eager than before, but still alive. Marlowe moved up on his wing, the two American fighters flying as a mirrored pair over the creeping cloud layer. Behind them, the Zeros tightened formation, sliding into a pincer pattern. One slightly high left, one slightly low right. Classic killbox. Keller smirked under his breath. "They're copying Saito." Marlowe heard him. "So what's the plan?" Keller inhaled sharply. We show them why that won't work." The first Zero struck suddenly, peeling high, then diving in a near-vertical slash, gun barrels twinkling as they spat tracer fire. The rounds snapped overhead, ricocheting off the Lightning's armored canopy frame with a metallic rain. Keller rolled under the burst, but the Lightning wallowed, slow to respond. The second Zero tightened its angle, adjusting perfectly to the wounded aircraft's predictable movement. They weren't improvising. They were reading it, matching his diminishing options, cornering him in the sky as the Lightning's maneuver envelope shrank with each stressed turn. "Rook, break right," Keller ordered. Marlowe peeled off, dragging the upper Zero with him. That left Keller and the lower fighter alone in a tightening downward spiral. The Zero edged closer, its wing wobbling subtly as the pilot bled speed to maintain position. Its nose drifted toward Keller's tail, perfectly lined up, perfectly confident. Too confident. Keller chopped the throttle. The sudden deceleration slammed him forward in his harness as the Lightning bucked violently, dropping into near-stall behavior. The Zero behind him overshot instantly, the pilot jerking upward in panic as he flashed past Keller's canopy. "Not today," Keller muttered. He rammed the throttles forward again. The Lightning leapt like a kicked animal, surging behind the Zero before the Japanese pilot could stabilize. The enemy fighter's wings skittered as the pilot wrestled with the sudden reversal of roles. Keller squeezed the trigger. A single precise burst. The .50 caliber rounds stitched clean through the Zero's fuselage. Smoke erupted from the cowling, the propeller seizing mid-rotation before the aircraft pitched downward, trailing flame. The pilot managed to bail out, a dark figure tumbling past Keller's wing before disappearing into the clouds below. Marlowe's voice erupted through static. "One left. Watch him, he's good." Keller scanned the sky, heart racing. The last Zero danced behind Marlowe, the Japanese pilot handling the aircraft with a finesse almost equal to Saito. He fired a long burst. Tracers sliced through Marlowe's left wing, perforating the aluminum in a spray of sparks. "Marlowe, brake high," Keller called. "Trying. He's glued to me." Keller hauled the Lightning around, wincing as the stressed boom groaned. The world tilted, horizons spinning as he forced the aircraft into a wide climbing turn toward Marlowe's position. He caught sight of the Zero, again Witt's pilot, pushing to close for the killing shot, its nose drifting closer to Marlowe's cockpit. Too close. Keller lined up, breathing shallow. But the angle was bad, too much lead, too much risk of hitting Marlowe. Come on, give me something," Keller whispered. The Zero shifted position slightly. "There," Keller fired. The burst was long, controlled, a stream of fire that intersected the Zero's flight path just as the Japanese pilot banked for the finishing shot. Rounds punched through the Zero's right wing, fuel sprayed into the slipstream, then ignited in a sudden violent blossom. The fighter flipped, trailing a burning arc before detonating in a fireball that flashed bright against the cloud deck. Marlowe let out a shaking breath on the radio. "Tom, you magnificent, holy hell." But Keller wasn't celebrating. His eyes dropped to the instrument panel. Hydraulics nearly gone. Right, boom temperature rising. A faint trail of smoke beginning to curl past the canopy. The Lightning shuddered again, a structural groan that felt like a warning. Marlowe floated into formation beside him. Canopy glass cracked, wing peppered with bullet holes. "We gotta head home, Tom," he said softly. Keller nodded, though his stomach twisted tight. Because even as the sky cleared of enemies, even as the smoke trails of broken fighters faded into the sea, the battle was far from over. The hardest part was still ahead. getting home in a wounded Lightning across miles of open ocean. The adrenaline drained as quickly as it had surged, leaving a thin, metallic taste in Keller's mouth. The sky was empty now. No more Zeros slicing through the sun, no more snarling engine notes weaving into the chaos of combat. Just wind, distance, and the low, uneven rattle of a wounded aircraft limping across a vast, indifferent ocean. He leveled off at 4,000 feet, the Lightning's shadow gliding over rolling blue swells that stretched to every horizon. The right boom trailed a thin line of smoke, dissipating into the slipstream. The engine on that side coughed once, sputtered, then grudgingly stabilized. Marlowe eased into formation on Keller's left. His P-38 looked almost as battered. Holes through the wing, chipped propeller blades, scorch marks along the fuselage. But it was flying. And that mattered more than anything right now. "Tom," Marlowe said quietly, "your starboard turbo's shot. Temp's climbing." "I see it," Keller replied, forcing calm into his voice, holding it steady. In truth, every vibration felt like a warning. Every flicker of the gauges like a countdown. The Lightning could fly on one engine if it had to, but with the hydraulics damaged and the frame weakened, losing an engine would turn control into a suggestion rather than a guarantee. Beneath them, the ocean heaved lazily, green in some places, deep indigo in others, flecked with whitecaps. Beautiful, if you weren't imagining what it would feel like to ditch into it with a burning wing and failing hydraulics. For a long minute, neither man spoke. Then Marlowe finally broke the silence. "You think Saito made it?" Keller blinked. The question caught him off guard. He replayed the moment, the canopy blasting free, the figure tumbling out, the white parachute snapping open like a paper flower. Saito suspended beneath it, drifting toward the forested ridge. "Yeah," Keller said after a beat. "Yeah, I think he did." "Hell of a pilot," Marlowe murmured. Keller nodded. He wasn't ashamed to admit it. Skill, recognized skill. Saito had nearly outflown him, nearly killed him. But he'd also pushed Keller to the edge, forced him into decisions that only experience and luck could justify. The radio crackled suddenly. "Lightning 2-1, Lightning 2-1, this is Bougainville Control. We show 2 friendlies low and slow off your 12 o'clock. Report status." Marlowe reached for the mic, but Keller gestured for silence. His voice needed to sound calm, unshaken. "Bougainville Control, this is 2-1 lead. 2 aircraft returning from sweep. Damage sustained, hydraulics compromised, starboard engine unstable. Requesting direct vector to home." A pause. Then, 2-1 lead, roger. Turn heading 185. Be advised, stormfront building west. Stay above 3,000. Recovery crew is prepped. Keller swallowed. "Copy." He banked gently to heading 185. The Lightning groaned, protesting the shift, but held together. But the sky ahead was changing. Dark clouds crawled over the horizon, their bellies swollen with rain. Thunderheads built upward in towering columns, their tops flattened like anvils. The Pacific could go from glass to fury in minutes, and Keller had no illusions about what a storm could do to a wounded aircraft. Marlowe tisked softly. "Of all the days. Wouldn't be a mission without something trying to kill us," Keller said. But even as he joked, a new fear knotted in his gut. The hydraulics pressure gauge flickered again, then dipped further. Keller hissed. "Rook, gear's not going to come down." Marlowe didn't reply immediately. "You sure?" "I'm sure. With the hydraulics failing, the landing gear might not deploy at all. And even if Keller could crank it manually, a belly landing in a Lightning, especially one this damaged, was a coin toss. A bad toss." Marlowe spoke again, voice low. "And we'll sit you down as soft as we can. I'll stick with you." Keller glanced over. Marlowe's P-38 flew steady beside him, wingtip gleaming. The loyalty in that formation, 2 battered machines heading home together, hit Keller with unexpected weight. He didn't answer, didn't need to. The storm grew closer. Wind buffeted the Lightning's frame. The altimeter wavered as downdrafts tugged at the aircraft, trying to peel it from the sky. Then the radio flared again. 2-1 lead, control. Stormfront moving faster than expected. Visibility dropping at field. Make best speed. Repeat, make best speed. Keller forced a thin laugh. Best speed isn't in the cards, control. But he nudged the throttles anyway. The right engine sputtered angrily. The temperature spiked. Alarms blinked. Keller eased the throttle back again. The engine stabilized, but just barely. And then, through a gap in the storm, he saw it. Bougainville. The airstrip lay like a tan scar across the green jungle, thin smoke columns rising from repair pits, tents dotting the perimeter. Jeeps and fuel trucks crawled across the hardpan. Even at this distance, Keller could imagine the crew chiefs watching the sky, waiting to see if their birds would make it home. He swallowed hard. "Rook, this is going to be rough." Marlowe chuckled, thin but genuinely warm. "When is it not?" The Lightning shuddered again. Hydraulics near zero. Smoke thickening. Right engine failing. The coastline approached. The storm pressed down. And Keller Bryant, Captain 339th Fighter Squadron, gripped the stick with both hands, feeling the tremors of a machine that had saved his life and was now asking him to save its own. Time to bring the lightning home. Rain swept across the nose of the lightning in oblique, slashing sheets, blurring the world into gray distortions. The storm had caught them. Wind buffeted the aircraft sideways, vibrations rippling down the weakened boom like the shudder of an injured animal. Keller tightened his grip on the stick, jaw clenched until it ached. Bougainville's airstrip lay ahead, a thin tan ribbon nearly swallowed by the creeping storm clouds. The signal flares on either side of the runway flickered like fireflies caught in a gale. Marlowe slid closer, his wingtip steady despite the turbulence. "You still with me, Tom?" "Still here," Keller said, though each second made it harder to believe it. The hydraulics gauge hit 0. Not low. 0. He reached for the emergency hand crank for the landing gear, the cumbersome steel lever wedged beside his seat. With the lightning bucking in the wind, he threw his full weight against it, forcing the crank through its stiff notches. Clunk! A violent jolt shuddered through the aircraft. The landing gear creaked halfway down, locking only because gravity and desperation helped finish what the hydraulics could not. "Port gear's down," Keller reported through ragged breaths. "Starboard, maybe?" Marlowe dipped beneath him, checking from below. "Tom, it's only halfway." The words hit like a punch. "Can it lock?" Keller asked. A pause. "Not by the look of it," Keller swallowed. A one-wheel landing, on a wet strip, in a wounded lightning. He'd seen pilots walk away from worse, sometimes. But he'd also seen aircraft tumble into cartwheeling infernos when one gear collapsed under stress. Marlowe's voice returned, steadier now. "You put her down gentle. I'll be right there with you." The runway grew larger in the windscreen, muddy edges, soft from days of rain, canvas tents fluttering violently. Ground crews were already lining the taxiways, tiny figures bracing against the storm. Bougainville control cut in over the radio. 2-1 lead, you are clear for immediate landing. Crash truck is rolling. Keep your nose high and throttle steady. Thunder cracked overhead, a deep, booming concussion that rattled the canopy. Keller lowered flaps manually, the handle stiff and grinding. The lightning pitched as wind clawed at the extended surfaces. He started his descent. The aircraft fought him. The damaged boom fluttered, the right wing feeling loose, sloppy, like fabric instead of metal. Rain streaked across the canopy in frantic, erratic lines. "Hold together," Keller murmured through clenched teeth. "Just a little longer." Marlowe paced him on the left, matching every adjustment, eyes locked on the failing gear. "Oh, easy, Tom. Ease her in. Just like training, just slower, wetter, and with more fire." Keller let out a rough, humorless laugh. Altitude, 300 feet. The runway lights brightened through the storm haze. The crash crew trucks glowed with oscillating red lamps, their engines revving as they prepared for the worst. Altitude, 100 feet. The lightning's stall horn began a low, mournful whine. Keller ignored it. He flared gently, letting the airspeed bleed while keeping the nose high. Altitude, 20 feet. The left wheel touched first. A sharp jolt, but it held. Then the right, a shudder, a metallic groan. The wheel bucked sideways, unable to support the weight. Keller felt the aircraft start to tilt, slow at first, then faster, pulled by its own collapsing gear. The Lightning's right wing dipped toward the runway. "Tom, power, power!" Marlowe shouted. Keller slammed the throttle forward on the left engine only. The surviving Allison roared. The aircraft straightened just enough, just barely, before the right wingtip scraped the runway in a shriek of tearing metal. Sparks erupted in a bright, violent cascade. The Lightning spun, slewing sideways across the wet surface like a skidding blade. Keller braced. The nose crumpled as it struck soft ground off the runway's edge. Mud blasted across the canopy. The world turned blur, then darkness, then stillness. Steam rose from the mangled nose cone. Rain hissed against hot metal. Smoke curled from the right boom in thin, exhausted spirals. For several seconds, Keller heard nothing but his own breath. Shallow, trembling, real. Then a voice burst through the headset. Tom, do you copy?" He reached for the mic with shaking fingers. "I'm here," he rasped. I'm here." The canopy glass above him cracked as Marlowe's boot slammed against it. Crew chiefs rushed in with pry bars. The canopy tore free with a burst of wet air, and Marlowe's face appeared, soaked from the rain, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. "You stupid son of a—" Marlowe laughed through a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You actually did it." Hands pulled Keller from the wreckage. Mud soaked his flight suit. Oil streaked his arms. His legs trembled so hard he nearly fell, but Marlowe caught him. Behind them, the Lightning lay broken, but intact. Its twin booms bent, nose crushed, right gear collapsed. But it had brought him home. Keller stared at it through the rain. "That," he whispered, "oh, it was for the men he shot down." Marlowe followed his gaze. "For Saito?" Keller nodded once. "And for the ones still out there." Thunder rolled again, but this time it sounded different. Not like danger, like closure. The storm eased by late afternoon, breaking apart into trailing wisps that drifted over the Bougainville mountains like spent ghosts. In the maintenance yard, under canvas tents sagging with rainwater, Keller sat wrapped in a wool blanket while a corpsman pressed a cold stethoscope to his ribs. "You're lucky," the corpsman muttered. Bruised, not broken. Keller managed a dry smirk. Didn't feel lucky. Marlowe snorted from the cot beside him. Luck's relative. You should have seen your landing from my cockpit. He paused, then added with mock seriousness, I saw my entire life flash before my eyes. Twice. Keller nudged him with an elbow, careful not to aggravate the soreness spreading across his torso. You didn't have to follow me in, you know. Marlowe rolled his eyes. Sure, and let you be the only hero on today's roster? Not a chance. Their laughter faded into the background hum of generators and the distant drumming of rain on canvas. But beneath the banter lay a quiet weight neither man spoke of. The knowledge that they'd walked a razor's edge today and survived only by skill, instinct, and the stubborn will of a machine that refused to die in enemy skies. A shadow loomed at the entrance of the medical tent. Major Grayson, the squadron CO, stepped inside with his cap tucked under one arm and a folder bulging with reports under the other. His expression was stern but not hostile, the look of a man who had commanded too many pilots for too many years. He stopped at the foot of Keller's cot. You brought her home, Grayson said quietly. Not many could have. Keller straightened, wincing. Lost hydraulics, right boom nearly tore itself apart. Gear collapsed. She's done, sir. Grayson's eyes softened with something like respect. She did her job, and so did you. He opened the folder and pulled out a sheet of paper, a reconnaissance map with a circle drawn around an inland ridge on the Japanese-held island. Saito's parachute was spotted by coast watchers, Grayson continued. Landed near a ravine. Word is he's injured but alive. Marlowe sat up straighter. Alive? After all that? Grayson nodded. A man like that doesn't go quietly. Keller took in the news. It didn't surprise him. Men like Saburō Saito, aces shaped by fire, forged in endless combat, didn't die easily. They lived on the edge of survival, same as he did. Will he fly again? Keller asked. Grayson shrugged. Hard to say, but if he can, he will. The tent fell silent. Outside, ground crews moved around the twisted wreck of Keller's Lightning, their flashlights bobbing through the rain-muted dusk. There was reverence in their movements, even as they prepared to strip the broken aircraft for salvageable parts. The P-38 was more than metal, more than engineering. It was a promise that American pilots could reach farther, climb higher, and strike deeper than their adversaries believed possible. A corporal poked his head inside the tent. Sir, weather's clearing. Sunset's about an hour off. You'll want to see this. Grayson gestured for Keller and Marlowe to follow. They stepped out into the open air. The storm had peeled away enough for the sun to break through, its dying light casting long orange bands across the runway. And there, lined up in formation on the taxi strip, were 8 P-38 Lightnings from the afternoon patrol group. Their booms gleamed wet under the fading sun. Their nose guns pointed toward the clouds. Their props ticked softly as they cooled. Marlowe let out a low whistle. Whole flight came back. Grayson nodded. Yours was the only major loss. Keller's throat tightened, not from pride, but from the quiet relief that washed over him at the sight of those silver birds returning safely. No missing man gaps today, no empty bunks tonight. Captain, Grayson said, turning toward him, intelligence believes the Japanese Ace Corps has taken a severe blow. Scouts report fewer aggressive sorties, more caution. They're wary. Keller raised a brow. Because of the P-38? Grayson smiled faintly. Because of what the P-38 did today. Word spreads fast. Marlowe elbowed him. Hear that, Tom? You scared the Imperial Navy. Keller shook his head. Not me, the Lightning. Because he knew the truth. The Japanese had underestimated the aircraft, laughed at its bulk, its twin booms, its unorthodox silhouette. They didn't laugh anymore. And across the island chains, over volcanoes and jungles, across open sea and hidden coves, other Lightnings would rise tomorrow. Fast, high-climbing, long-legged, deadly. Hunters, just like the men who flew them. As the sun dipped below the trees, Keller felt the weight of exhaustion settle into his bones. But alongside it came something else, a steady, grounded calm. He had survived. His squadron had survived. And the sky, once again, belonged to those who dared to master it. He turned toward Marlowe, who was watching the horizon with a quiet, knowing grin. Same time tomorrow? Marlowe asked. Keller smirked. Let's hope tomorrow's a little less exciting. Marlowe snorted. You say that every time. They stood there until the last light faded, two silhouettes framed against the glowing remains of the day. Pilots, brothers, survivors. The war wasn't over. But for now, the storm had passed.